Have you ever felt like something was off, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it? Like your choices were no longer your own. Like a quiet force was guiding your steps, shaping your reactions, pulling strings in silence. You thought you were being kind. You thought you were being understanding. But deep down, something felt wrong, and you couldn't explain why. Maybe you gave a favor you didn't want to give. Maybe you agreed in a conversation where you knew you were right. Maybe you trusted someone who later revealed a side you never expected. This isn't a coincidence. This is design. Because whether you realize it or not, you are being manipulated. By those close to you, by the media you consume, by the people who know exactly how to play the subtle mechanics of your mind. And the worst part, you think you're making your own decisions. Niccolò Machiavelli saw it centuries ago. Power does not always wear a crown. Often, it wears a smile. And its strongest weapon is not violence, but emotional leverage. This video is not here to comfort you. It's here to arm you, to hand you the lens that Machiavelli himself used to dissect human nature. A lens so sharp, it cuts through every illusion. Because the one who doesn't understand manipulation is condemned to be shaped by it. And the one who refuses to see their own weakness will be ruled by those who do. You don't need a villain to be controlled. You just need to be unaware. But today, that ends. Welcome to the art of seeing clearly, of thinking independently, of living untouchable. If that's what you're ready for, then let's begin. Manipulation doesn't always come dressed in threat. It often arrives wearing charm. A soft voice, a kind gesture, a look that says, "I understand you." And that's precisely why it works. The most dangerous form of control is the one that convinces you that you are free. It whispers instead of shouting. It asks instead of commanding. And it always makes sure that you think the decision was yours. Machiavelli understood this. He never romanticized human nature. He never assumed that people act out of goodness or principle. He studied the mechanics beneath the surface, the levers of desire, fear, guilt, and approval that truly move men. He wrote, "Men judge more by their eyes than by their hands," which is to say, perception is everything. Not truth, not justice, not even logic. Perception, the crafted image, the emotional setup, the carefully staged theater of motives. That's where manipulation lives. Have you ever noticed how some people always seem to get what they want? They don't raise their voice. They don't demand. They don't threaten. They just steer. They read the room. They read you. They pay attention to things most people overlook. The hesitation in your tone. The insecurity in your laugh. The need in your eyes when you're trying not to need. And once they understand your internal wiring, they never pull. They only suggest. And somehow, you do exactly what they hoped you would. You think it's your idea, but it was theirs all along. This isn't magic. This is calculation, a learned skill, one that Machiavelli admired, not because it was noble, but because it was effective. He never claimed that the world is fair. He claimed that the world is predictable, that people are driven by the same handful of emotions: fear, desire, status, security. And the one who understands these patterns can pull the strings behind every decision. This is the subtle power of manipulation. It starts before the first word is spoken. It begins in silence, in watching, in analyzing the target. The manipulator listens more than they speak. They notice the cracks before they appear. They pick up on your hunger for validation, your fear of rejection, your tendency to apologize for your existence. And when the moment is right, they strike softly. A compliment, a sigh, a phrase like, "I thought you were different." And just like that, you're dancing to music you didn't choose, in a script you didn't write, on a stage you didn't build. But it feels real. It feels personal. It feels like life. That's the brilliance of psychological manipulation. It doesn't need force. It only needs your participation. And most people give it willingly because they don't realize they're in a game. They think they're being kind. They think they're being understanding. They think keeping the peace is the same as keeping their dignity. But Machiavelli would say, number That's not peace. That's surrender. And surrender, once given emotionally, becomes a habit, a way of life. You stop questioning. You stop resisting. You start blaming yourself for the pain others cause. Because the best manipulators don't control your actions. They control your interpretation of them. They make you doubt your instincts. They make you wonder if maybe you're too sensitive, too selfish, too much. And in that fog, they take control, quietly, effortlessly, precisely. Now, understand this. You are not manipulated because you are stupid. You are manipulated because you are human. Because every human being has a blind spot, a weakness, a wound, a silent need. And when that weakness goes unexamined, it becomes the lever others will pull. Machiavelli warned us not to assume that appearances reflect reality. He taught us that people will use morality, love, kindness, not as values, but as tools, as masks, as weapons. And unless you begin to look beyond the performance, you will always be the one being played. So stop asking, why are they doing this to me? And start asking, what in me allowed this to happen? Because until you confront the part of you that submits, you will keep submitting, and it will feel like choice. But it won't be. That's the hidden tragedy of being human. But it doesn't have to be your destiny. The battlefield of manipulation is not out there. It's not in the conversations you have, not in the decisions you make. It's inside you, in the unhealed places, in the emotional gaps you never learned to see. This is the manipulator's playground. They don't invade your mind with brute force. They walk into the spaces you left undefended. Spaces shaped by childhood, shaped by shame, shaped by years of bending just to be accepted. You're not weak. You're not naive. You're simply human. But that's exactly what makes you vulnerable. Some of us carry wounds so old they've become familiar. The need to be liked. The fear of disappointing others. The guilt that creeps in whenever we choose ourselves first. And the manipulator sees that before you do. They see the man who was raised to earn love by being useful, who says yes before he even thinks, who apologizes for simply existing. They see the woman who was taught that putting up walls is selfish, that saying no makes her cold, that protecting herself is an act of betrayal. And into these cracks, they pour themselves, with a smile, with charm, with carefully chosen words that feel like care but are actually control. Machiavelli wrote that men are driven by two main impulses, love and fear. He didn't mean affection and terror. He meant validation and rejection. The two forces that shape nearly every decision you make, whether you realize it or not. You want to be wanted. You want to be safe. You want to belong. And so, when someone offers even the illusion of those things, you bend, you adjust, you surrender, not because you're broken, but because you crave relief. And this is the trap, because the manipulator doesn't force. They let you move the pieces. They let you say yes. They let you lower your guard. They don't ask. They imply. They don't command. They hint. And when you comply, they smile. Because now, you're doing it to yourself. That's the elegance of emotional manipulation. It's clean. It's silent. It leaves no fingerprints. And unless you learn to trace your own reactions back to their root, you'll never know where the control began. Do you feel guilty when you say no? Do you over-explain your boundaries? Do you try to please everyone, even when it exhausts you? Then somewhere inside you, there's a voice that says, if I'm not agreeable, I won't be loved. If I stand my ground, I'll be abandoned. And if I protect myself, I'm selfish. That voice didn't start with you. It started long ago, from parents, from culture, from a moment in childhood when kindness became currency. And now, it plays on repeat. Every time someone tugs at your loyalty, every time someone gaslights you into silence, every time someone says, I can't believe you do this to me, and you stay, and you give, and you lose yourself a little more. But Machiavelli had no interest in guilt. He wasn't sentimental. He believed that weakness, when ignored, invites exploitation, not because people are evil, but because they are opportunistic. He warned rulers to study human nature as it is, not as it should be, to recognize that those who hesitate are overthrown by those who don't, that those who wait to be respected are ruled by those who command it. And what's true in politics is also true in love, in family, in business, in every relationship where power is unspoken but always present. Your emotions are not the enemy. Your ignorance of them is, because until you name what controls you, you cannot control it. Until you expose what drives your need to please, you will keep handing your power away. And that's what manipulation truly feeds on. Not stupidity, not weakness, but your silence. So break it. Say it out loud. I feel guilt. I feel fear. I crave approval. Not as an excuse, but as a map that will lead you out of this invisible prison. Because only when you name the chain can you begin to break it. And when you do, that's when the manipulator loses. Not in a fight, not in a screaming match, but in your quiet refusal to be shaped by anything but truth. This is where the shift begins. Not from resistance, but from awareness. You are not a puppet. You are not a pawn, but only if you choose to stop living like one. It's easy to spot manipulation when it comes from strangers. The red flags are visible. The language feels rehearsed. The intention is distant. You have room to step away. But what happens when the manipulator is your mother, your partner, your best friend, the person who says they love you? What happens when the chains come laced with affection? This is where it becomes dangerous, because it no longer feels like control. It feels like care. They say, I'm only doing this because I love you. And you believe them. They say, without you, I'm nothing. And you stay. Not because you're blind, but because you're loyal, because you're kind, because walking away from someone you love feels like betrayal. But Machiavelli would ask a harder question. Not, do they love you? But, what do they do with that love? Because real love frees. It doesn't bind. Real love empowers. It doesn't guilt. Real love honors your individuality. It doesn't erase it. But manipulation wears many masks. And when it comes wrapped in memories, shared experiences, and emotional debt, it becomes almost impossible to call out. You tell yourself, they're just hurt. They don't mean it. This is just how they are. And so little by little, you silence your truth to protect their comfort. You walk on eggshells. You edit your words. You shrink yourself to avoid upsetting them. And in doing so, you vanish. Not all at once, but piece by piece. This is the most sophisticated kind of manipulation, the one that turns your virtue into your prison. Your empathy becomes your leash. Your loyalty becomes your cage. And your silence becomes their power. At work, it sounds like, you should be grateful. Who else would give you this opportunity? In family, it echoes, you owe us everything. After all we've done for you. Escrew. In love, it whispers, if you leave, no one will ever love you like I do. And maybe they're right, but that doesn't make them good. It makes them effective. And Machiavelli respected effectiveness more than virtue. He understood that some people don't need to rule with iron fists. They rule with implication, with a sigh, with the silence after your no, with the tears that fall when you try to stand up for yourself. And the question isn't whether they're aware. The question is, why do you keep bending? This is the wound no one talks about. The heartbreak of realizing that love isn't always clean. That some people love you through control. That some only feel secure when you are small. That some only feel powerful when you feel guilty. But here's what you need to hear. Proximity does not equal truth. Time invested does not equal trust. And just because someone says they love you, doesn't mean they know how to love you well. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is walk away from someone who thinks they own you. Not with anger, not with cruelty, but with clarity. You say, this is where I end and you begin. You don't get to decide what I feel, what I choose, or who I become. And when the tears come, when the accusations flood in, you stay still, because the manipulator thrives on reaction. They wait for your guilt. They feed on your need to explain, to soften, to reverse your boundary. But this time, you don't. You let them sit with the emptiness their control created, and you walk out of the role they wrote for you. It's not easy. It hurts. You'll question yourself. You'll grieve. But what you'll gain is greater. You'll regain your clarity, your voice, your spine, and most of all, your self-respect. Machiavelli would call this a repositioning of power, not to dominate, but to re-establish the balance, to remind the other person that your love is not servitude, that your presence is not a right, but a privilege. So ask yourself, who in your life is keeping you small? Who makes you doubt yourself under the name of care? And what would happen if you stopped playing your part in their script? Because if you never stop to ask those questions, you'll never hear your own answers. And the play will go on, long after you've forgotten it was never your stage to begin with. Once you see the strings, you can't unsee them. Once you understand the game, you can't keep pretending you're not in it. The only way out of manipulation is not through more kindness, not through louder boundaries. It's through strategy, because kindness without strategy becomes exploitation. Empathy without clarity becomes surrender. And love, when not guided by self-respect, becomes the very noose that tightens around your freedom. Machiavelli never told us to stop feeling. He told us to stop being predictable. He told us that power doesn't belong to the loud, but to the observant. The one who thinks before speaking, who listens before reacting, who plans not to hurt, but to never be hurt again. And that begins with pattern recognition. Stop living on emotional autopilot. Ask yourself, what is your default response when people pressure you? When they flatter you? When they guilt you? Do you fold? Do you explain? Do you stay silent, just to keep the peace? If so, you're not choosing, you're reacting. And the manipulator is counting on that. Strategic thinking starts by breaking your own patterns. Say no, where you usually say yes. Be silent where you used to explain. Step back when they expect you to chase. That moment of unpredictability shatters their rhythm because they don't know what comes next. And power lives in that uncertainty. Machiavelli wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one must choose." But fear, in this context, isn't cruelty. It's respect. It's the kind of presence that says, I won't be moved just because you want me to. I won't be swayed by flattery or guilt. I won't negotiate my worth. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming conscious. When you master emotional detachment, you no longer hand people the script to control your mind. You see their tactics, and you pause. You delay the reaction, and in that pause, you reclaim your power. Another principle Machiavelli lived by: control the perception, because perception is more powerful than truth. So stop over-explaining yourself. Stop defending your boundaries. Speak less, reveal less. Leave room for others to wonder, because in silence, you hold the upper hand. The manipulator needs you to expose yourself emotionally. They need you to cry, to yell, to justify. They want you to be loud, because the louder you are, the easier you are to predict. So train your silence. Use it as a mirror. Let them confront their own tactics in the absence of your reaction. And then, most importantly, build your identity like a fortress. Know who you are. Know what you believe. Know what you will and will not tolerate. Because the manipulator's goal isn't to destroy you. It's to make you question yourself. To plant seeds of doubt that you water with your own overthinking. But when your inner foundation is solid, when your sense of self is rooted, no external voice can override your inner compass. You don't need to prove yourself anymore. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You don't need to fix what was never yours to carry. And that is liberation. Machiavelli believed that the prudent man is one who studies history, who learns from the great minds before him, who watches how others fall, and chooses not to follow. You don't need to become ruthless. You need to become aware. Because in a world where everyone is trying to influence you, your self-awareness is your shield. Your silence is your sword, and your strategy is your freedom. So ask yourself, are you still playing defense? Still reacting? Still explaining? Or are you ready to lead your own mind? Like a strategist, not a survivor, because the battlefield is invisible, but the war is real, and only those who think like Machiavelli will walk through this world untouched. The final battle is not with the manipulator, it's with yourself. Not the self you show the world, but the version that was shaped long before you knew what power meant. The version that was trained to submit, to please, to obey. The truth is hard, but it will set you free, because the real manipulator isn't always a person. Sometimes, it's a voice you internalized years ago, a belief you never questioned, a story you were told about who you must be, and what you must sacrifice to be loved. Maybe it was a parent who made affection conditional. Maybe it was a teacher who praised your silence more than your spirit. Maybe it was society, whispering again and again, "Don't rock the boat. Don't make people uncomfortable. Don't say no." And now, here you are, an adult, still asking for permission, still explaining your value, still living like someone else holds the key to your worth. Machiavelli saw this with chilling clarity. He knew that the most effective control doesn't come from power over nations. It comes from shaping beliefs, influencing perception, convincing a man that the cage he's in is where he belongs. And that's the final lie you must burn. Because you were never meant to be small. You were never born to be agreeable. You were not made to be a background character in someone else's story. The moment you stop mistaking your conditioning for character, you begin. The moment you realize that obedience is not virtue, but fear disguised, you begin. And the moment you decide that no one, not even your past, gets to define you anymore, you win. But this battle is not loud. It's not a fight with fists. It's a quiet, relentless decision to take your mind back, to stop giving away your peace in exchange for approval, to stop bending your boundaries so others can feel taller, to stop calling your silence strength when it's really fear in a mask. Because power isn't about control, it's about clarity. When you know what you stand for, you can't be moved. When you know who you are, you stop asking others for permission to exist. And when you reach that place, something changes. People feel it. They no longer talk over you. They no longer guilt you. They no longer try to steer your choices, not because you became aggressive, but because your presence became undeniable. Machiavelli never asked you to become cruel. He asked you to become sovereign, to stop letting your emotions be used against you, to stop trading your self-respect for peace, to stop waiting for others to value you when you haven't done it first. This is the final war, and it's fought in silence. Every time you say no, without guilt. Every time you walk away without needing to explain. Every time you let someone misunderstand you and still choose not to shrink. That is power. That is control. That is liberation. Not granted by anyone, taken by you. So ask yourself, what part of your mind is still under someone else's influence? Whose voice still echoes in your decisions? And what would your life look like if you thought for yourself? Fully, clearly, fearlessly? You already know the answer. You've always known. You were just waiting for permission to act on it. But no more. Because the moment you stop asking for permission, you begin to create your own rules, your own voice, your own life. And that life doesn't belong to anyone else. It's yours now. So take it. You've reclaimed your mind, but don't think the world will stop trying. It never does. It only changes masks. New voices, new demands, new faces with the same old patterns. That's the nature of power. It doesn't knock once. It circles back. It tests your defenses. It waits for your moments of weakness, for fatigue, for doubt, for loneliness. And in those moments, it will whisper again. Guilt will knock. Fear will tap on your shoulder. The need for approval will return, wearing new clothes. and you'll be tempted to let it in, to explain yourself again, to shrink, to bend, just a little. But this time you won't, because now you know the pattern. You see the game, you feel it before it even begins. This is the true mark of someone who has stepped out of the role of puppet and into the role of strategist. Machiavelli understood this better than most. He never promised peace. He never promised fairness. What he offered was something more valuable: awareness, power through clarity, a way to walk through a manipulative world without ever being owned by it. And in that awareness, you find stillness, not numbness, not coldness, but control, the kind of presence that doesn't flinch, that doesn't chase, that doesn't beg to be understood. You don't need to fight every battle. You don't need to win every argument. Your silence, your distance, your self-mastery is your new form of resistance, because the truly powerful are not those who dominate others. They're the ones who cannot be dominated. So from this moment forward, be hard to read, be impossible to predict, be untouchable, not by hiding, but by standing so firm in your truth that no storm can shake you. Let people misuse you. Let them project. Let them walk away. Because anything that leaves you when you stop pleasing it was never love. It was manipulation dressed as affection. You were not born to be shaped by hands that don't understand your worth. You were not made to explain your boundaries to people who benefit from crossing them. And you were never obligated to carry the guilt of someone else's disappointment. You are here for something deeper, to live with full awareness, to walk with emotional armor, not as a wall, but as wisdom, to speak less, observe more, and choose with precision. Because in a world full of noise, clarity is rare. In a world full of games, sovereignty is power. You have that now. Don't give it back. And if this message found you at the right time, don't let it stop here. Let it live inside you. Let it shape your next no, your next silence, your next decision that honors your truth over someone else's comfort. And if it helped you, click like, subscribe, but not for me, for you. Because every time you choose growth over guilt, clarity over confusion, and strength over submission, you are building a life no one can manipulate again. Not because you've become harder, but because you've become wiser. And wisdom is the final power.